I was recently watching WWE with a friend of mine. They're largely unfamiliar with pro wrestling, and when they heard the catchphrase of a particular wrestler called Roman Reigns, they remarked that it was a silly catchphrase. It sounded juvenile. How could anyone take this wrestler seriously? That catchphrase being, "Acknowledge me." A phrase itself that Roman Reigns has directed to fellow wrestlers, crowds in attendance, and viewers watching at home alike. Acknowledge me. While my friend brushed it off as a simple plea for attention, I felt it went a lot deeper than that. Acknowledge me. Don't just see me. Don't just understand that I'm here. Don't passively consume my existence. Acknowledge me. And I could feel a super long, annoying, and well, actually answer bubbling inside me, so instead of just letting the moment pass, like a normal person would, I decided to make this video instead because the thought had been threatening to burst from my brain every day since. The more I thought about those two words, acknowledge me, the more I realized that this little phrase summed up not just Roman Reigns as a character and pro wrestler, but the entirety of the pro wrestling industry. Now, that might sound a little too pretentious and grand, but we'll get there. The aim of this video is to try to explain to you the workings of pro wrestling, the frankly astounding career-spanning story of Roman Reigns as a wrestler, and why Acknowledge Me is such a crucial part of it, and why that story is a representative microcosm of all of major pro wrestling. I think, or at least hope, that this will be interesting whether you like pro wrestling or not. So, enjoy. So this video has a lot of footage in it, specifically WWE footage, and WWE are well known for issuing copyright flags and taking the money that other people would earn from the videos, so there's a very high chance that that would happen to me too. So just thought I'd mention that I do have a Patreon page, patreon.com/PeteRepeat. You can watch it there ad-free, you get early access, exclusive videos, all that stuff. Just thought I'd mention it. On with the video. If you're like my friend and also unfamiliar with pro wrestling, you need to understand something quite crucial about it. There's a brilliant video by Super Eyepatch Wolf called The Unreality of Pro Wrestling, which he recently released an extended version of, and in that video he explains perfectly the struggle for TV time that wrestlers face.
In professional wrestling, the most limited, valuable, and sought-after commodity there is TV time, as it's time on television that allows wrestlers to get over with the audience, to sell merch, to build storylines, which leads to high-paying pay-per-view matches. Any wrestler getting a decent amount of TV time invariably means dozens of wrestlers who are not.
It's this weird vicious cycle in wrestling. If you're not given much TV time, the crowd can't connect with you. If the crowd can't connect with you, you're not booked in meaningful stories. If you're not booked in meaningful stories, you don't get TV time. So it's this strange race where everyone is trying to maximize their minutes that they're on screen. Everyone is vying for attention. But then there's this weird subsection of that fight for TV time too, and that's battling with how much TV time the audience thinks you should have. Crowds in attendance and viewers watching at home can quite easily not get enough of one wrestler or think they're being fed too much of another. Fans will turn on wrestlers they deem to be overbearing and will support those they deem to be underbearing. And this constant back and forth between audience expectation and what the company books has resulted in some pretty major moments and changes within the company over the years. Like, for example, February 2015, Monday Night Raw. A scheduled women's tag team match is set to take place between the teams of Paige and Emma versus the Bella twins, Nikki and Brie. Nikki Bella at this time is the Divas champion, the only women's championship in the company. Yes, the women were called Divas in this era. I'm just gonna have to mention it and move on. After Paige making her entrance, Emma entering during a commercial break, and the Bella twins joining shortly after, totaling 1 minute and 41 seconds of entrances on TV, the match begins. Emma and Brie Bella start. Brie knocks Paige off the ring. Emma checks on Paige. Brie hits her finishing move and pins her to win. The match lasts exactly 30 seconds. This isn't necessarily a bad thing in isolation. Squash matches and surprisingly quick bouts have existed throughout the history of pro wrestling. Hell, one of my all-time favorites was Goldberg vs. Brock Lesnar from Survivor Series 2016 that lasted 1 minute and 25 seconds. But the problem with this women's tag match lasting 30 seconds was that it wasn't telling a story. The aforementioned Goldberg vs. Brock Lesnar match was so shocking and so surprising because of its length. Brock Lesnar had been portrayed as the most dominant wrestler of the last decade, and for a guy like Goldberg to come in and beat him in 90 seconds was unthinkable. But for the women, this was just another week of nothing. This was commonplace at the time. Women's wrestlers not being given anything to work with, getting zero TV time some weeks, and even when they did wrestle, it was for a minute or less. No TV time, no connection with the fans, no push, no TV time. This match was the final straw for many wrestling fans around the world. They were tired of the women on WWE's roster being paraded out, given nothing to work with, and being sent right to the back. WWE had ticked their box. They had women. So a social media movement began with the hashtag #GiveDivas directed at WWE themselves for their lackluster and in some cases offensive treatment of the women at their company. This genuinely made WWE pivot and introduce the Women's Revolution, which is a really, really strange piece of reality-bending booking. WWE would finally champion their women, giving them main event matches, big stipulations, with the overt message of breaking the stereotype that women were just eye candy. A stereotype WWE had enforced for decades. They were the villains of their own story, but also the heroes for featuring the women now. They would always reference these glass ceilings and mistreatment of women's wrestlers in the past, but never who did the mistreating. It was so weird. Fortunately, these days, WWE is very different, and some of the women on the roster make up the biggest stars in the company. But it wouldn't have happened if the fans weren't aware of the limited resource of TV time and how WWE was squandering it. I want to give one more example of this before moving on, because it's important later, and that's the rise of Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan had a very strange WWE career. He was brought into NXT, which at the time was a baffling game show / humiliation ritual masquerading as a professional wrestling TV show.
You have 30 seconds to talk about flowers.
NXT was supposed to be WWE's developmental show where rookies, the newcomers, were partnered with pros, established WWE superstars, in order to improve and eventually make it onto the main WWE shows of Raw and SmackDown themselves. Worth noting at this point though, that Daniel Bryan was labeled as a rookie despite having 11 years of wrestling experience before even being signed to WWE, including a hugely popular and successful run in Ring of Honor under his real name, Bryan Danielson. Fans of Ring of Honor and independent wrestling who'd seen generational runs from Bryan, lauding him as one of the greatest wrestlers of this era, saw him labeled as a rookie. It was an insult, especially when combined with who his pro was, The Miz, who had joined WWE after being a reality TV star and had less in-ring experience than Bryan by a number of years. Fast forward a year and Bryan was essentially nobody on the roster. He was often used as enhancement talent, losing and making other wrestlers look better. But that changed in 2011 when, rather shockingly, Bryan won the Money in the Bank briefcase, meaning at any time he could cash it in for a shot at a world championship. He then went on to lose a lot in the remainder of the year, until in December at TLC, he cashed in the briefcase and, despite all odds, became World Heavyweight Champion. Now, you could say that this was Bryan's big break, he deserved it, management had seen how brilliant a wrestler he was, and now he was going to be treated with respect, and obviously not, that's not what happened. Bryan was intentionally made to look inferior, which, again, is not necessarily a bad thing in isolation. He was now being portrayed as a heel, a villain, someone who snuck his way into the title, and that's fine, I guess, but even this small amount of exposure and TV time to the audience began to show everyone a window into who Daniel Bryan actually was. And that's one of the best wrestlers to ever live. Despite being a heel, there started to be some fan support for Bryan. People enjoyed watching him. Combine this with the small section of WWE fans who'd seen his run in Ring of Honor before WWE, finally being able to tell people, "I told you so, he's amazing," and you had an organic groundswell of support beginning, which made fans really angry when at WrestleMania 28, in Daniel Bryan's first ever WrestleMania, I'm not counting his untelevised match of the previous year's show, he lost his World Heavyweight Championship to Sheamus in just 18 seconds. Viewers of WWE deemed that Bryan had earned more than that. And so on the next episode of Monday Night Raw, immediately after WrestleMania 28, when Sheamus stepped into the ring...
That's pretty impressive. Too bad no one is gonna remember that in a month.
And so the Yes movement began. See, when he was a heel, Daniel Bryan had entered doing a little taunt where he put his hands above his head and said the word yes. Repeatedly. It was designed to get heat. He was meant to be a little obnoxious. Crowds were supposed to boo him. But in the wake of Bryan's loss and growing fan support for his deemed mistreatment, audiences started doing this throughout every arena at every show. The feeling only grew when WWE paired Daniel Bryan with the monster heel Kane in an oddball tag team, the two taking part in anger management skits which were genuinely funny and only made the crowd love Bryan more. The two became so beloved as a duo that WWE turned them into good guys, winning the tag team titles, only losing them in 2013 to this group called The Shield. I wonder if that will become relevant very shortly. But despite Bryan being tag champion and having significantly more TV time than he had in prior years, it wasn't enough for the fans. He had a 6-minute match at WrestleMania 29, he and Kane split up, he competed in the Money in the Bank ladder match, and it still wasn't enough. The fan support was so large that after a fan poll of the live crowd by John Cena, he chose Daniel Bryan as his opponent for the WWE Championship at SummerSlam, a match that Daniel Bryan won. But this wasn't the plan that WWE had in mind. So instead of changing course and going with the momentum Daniel Bryan provided, he lost. And he lost again, and he lost again, and WWE tried to force him back down the card. But fans weren't having it. They had chosen Daniel Bryan as their champion, and it didn't matter what WWE wanted, they had deemed that Bryan had earned it. At Royal Rumble 2014, fans were eagerly anticipating Bryan entering the eponymous match, where 30 wrestlers enter at timed intervals, being eliminated by being thrown over the top rope to the floor, the winner being granted a shot at the world title in the main event of WrestleMania. So, it's a pretty big deal, and now seemed like the exact right time to pull the trigger on Daniel Bryan, putting him in the main event against the guy who stole the title from him the previous year, and to finally have him overcome. But the entrance came, and came, and came, and Bryan was nowhere to be seen. But surely they're saving him for number 30. He'd be the big final entrant in the match. No. Daniel Bryan wasn't even in the match at all. The live crowd turned on the whole match, booing every single person remaining.
He is a winner of the two tonight. Whoa! Rey Mysterio in trouble now. Whoa!
They were hated for simply not being Daniel Bryan. Remember that specific sentence. They were hated for simply not being Daniel Bryan. It will be important. WWE tried to do their planned WrestleMania main event, but crowds at every show made their voices heard, and WWE were forced to pivot, inserting Bryan into the match, with Bryan winning the world title in the main event of WrestleMania 30. It was an all-time moment, and one that proved that when the audience had chosen their champion, there was little WWE could do. The audience felt Bryan had been underserved to them, and they couldn't get enough of him, so they demanded more, and WWE ceded under the weight of the audience's voices. In a way, the crowd was demanding that WWE acknowledge them. Acknowledge who they wanted, what they needed to see. And now with that context established, I want to transition to talk about a wrestler called Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns debuted on the main roster of WWE in 2012, being part of a little group called The Shield. See, I told you The Shield would come up soon. And The Shield were awesome. Immediately being pushed as a threat and a big deal from the get-go, they were a much-needed jolt of something new in a WWE that had become kinda stale in the past few years. They got TV time, but WWE was still somewhat conservative with it. The Shield interrupted matches and initiated beatdowns and cut short to the point promos. It was much more about their aura than any one thing they did or said, so fans couldn't get enough of them. And Roman Reigns, as part of this group, he very rarely talked, only growling out the occasional line during their promos, instead just being the big hulking dude in the back. But Roman Reigns in matches was reserved as the nuke. He would enter a match and would decimate people. The other members of the Shield, Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose, would weaken the opponents, then Roman would come in and finish the job. His limited time in the ring and limited exposure made him more exciting. So what happens when the Shield splits up and Roman needs to stand on his own? Well, it wasn't great. See, WWE management had decided that Roman Reigns was the guy, the one to build the company around. So after the Shield split up, they demanded a lot more from him than quick bursts in matches and a line or two in a promo. Suddenly, he needed to hold his own, cutting 20-minute long speeches and wrestling 25-minute plus main event matches on his own, where he couldn't be protected as part of a tag team. And he wasn't ready. Not by a long shot.
And Roman Reigns, see, he had magic beans. And when I win the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, I'm not sorry.
He was forced into a role he wasn't ready for, cut promos that weren't his style, wrestled matches that didn't suit him, and it all exposed him as exactly what he was: inexperienced. But all the while he was given more and more TV time, and the commentary and the way he was spoken about was in revered terms like some sort of deity, and it just caused this massive incongruence between what fans were watching and what WWE were telling us. It was inorganic, and the frankly insane amount of TV time dedicated to him felt like it was gifted to him because he was chosen by the executives rather than earned because he was chosen by the fans. And those fans that didn't choose him, they rejected him. We booed him relentlessly, mercilessly, at every show, in every arena, in every country. Roman was the most hated wrestler on the planet. Unlike the women and Daniel Bryan in the previous examples, who the audience had deemed to be worthy of more TV time, this time everyone had decided that Roman Reigns was being given too much. He was not the guy. This all came to a head at an infamous show known as Royal Rumble 2015. 1 year after Royal Rumble 2014, when fans turned on the whole match because of Daniel Bryan, or lack thereof, history repeated itself. But this time, much worse. See, with the whole Daniel Bryan thing, I mentioned before that after Royal Rumble 2014, plans changed because of fan support and he was put into the main event of WrestleMania and won the world title. But unfortunately, not long after that, Bryan had to relinquish the belt and have neck surgery due to a real-life injury. So, having never lost the title to another wrestler, Daniel Bryan made his return to the company in this match at Royal Rumble 2015. What a perfect story for Bryan to return, win the Rumble, and challenge for the belt he never lost at WrestleMania. Righting the wrong of the Royal Rumble the previous year, all would be forgiven. But that's not what happened. Daniel Bryan entered the Royal Rumble match and everyone felt that this was it. This was the moment. This was Bryan's Rumble to win. So he got eliminated immediately. And about 10 minutes later, somebody else entered. And the fans knew what was about to happen. Boos rang out of every corner of the arena as the match trudged along to a Roman Reigns victory. Even an appearance from Roman Reigns' cousin, The Rock, couldn't stop this crowd. They hated Roman Reigns for not being Daniel Bryan. In the audience's eyes, Roman Reigns had stolen the spot that should have been reserved for Bryan. This began a trend. Roman Reigns was hated everywhere at all times. And did WWE pivot, change plans, find somebody else? No, they were adamant. But how long did this go on for? A few months? A year? Surely WWE would get the message. Crowds being vocal had worked in the past. Surely they would relent. Well, from January 2015 at the Royal Rumble, Roman Reigns was pushed as the top good guy in the company for 5 years. He main evented WrestleMania 31, 32, 33, and 34 against all-time stars like Brock Lesnar, Triple H, and The Undertaker. It didn't matter what he did, who he wrestled, what he said, or even how much he improved, the crowds wanted him gone. They refused to accept him as the top guy. They refused to acknowledge him. But 5 years after Royal Rumble 2015, the pandemic began. So plans for Roman Reigns to fight Goldberg for the Universal Championship were shelved, as due to Roman's history of leukemia, he was immunocompromised and couldn't safely attend shows. And so Roman was off TV for several months. It was what fans had wanted, but probably not in the way they wanted it. But in the summer of 2020, Roman returned, and he was different. WWE had finally made the decision to make Roman a villain. He had a new swagger about him, a new character. This was someone completely different. And he had a new catchphrase to go along with it. And I'm sure you can guess what it is. That's right, it's wreck everyone and leave. It's not quite as good. But after a few weeks, he adopted the new catchphrase, acknowledge me. Now, this was brought about because Roman was now drawing on his genuine Samoan heritage, and commonly in Samoan culture, the leader of communities, known as the Matai, is acknowledged by everyone else in that community. Only those who serve the community the most are chosen to be the Matai, shown by a Samoan proverb, Ole ala ilipule o la tautua, which means the road to authority is through service. And in WWE, Roman Reigns was claiming to be the tribal chief, essentially the Matai. And in his eyes, he had served not only his family, but all of WWE and its audience for years now. He was the most deserving to be acknowledged. After immediately winning the world title upon his return, Roman Reigns defended it against his real-life cousin, Jey Uso. And was Roman giving his cousin a fighting shot at the title out of the goodness of his heart? No. He never thought Jey could win. All he wanted from this match was Jey to acknowledge him as the head of their family. That's it.
You are my tribal chief and the Universal Champion! You are my tribal chief!
I don't want you to tell me I need him to acknowledge me.
It took 2 matches for Jey to acknowledge him, and once he did, Roman had been crowned the head of the table and the tribal chief. But that's not the only use of acknowledge me. Sure, it worked in story for Roman to command the respect of other wrestlers, but he also called out for live crowds to acknowledge him too. And still, the crowds booed. This time it was intentional. Roman was supposed to be booed. He was a villain. But this weird blend of reality and fiction that is unique to wrestling allowed WWE to combine the reality of Roman being booed in the past and exploit that into Roman's character now. For years and years, Roman Reigns could not get the crowd to acknowledge him. And now, in story, they still rejected him. After everything he's been through, crowds still booed. The championships he'd won, the main event matches he'd had, it was all management's decision and he was punished by the fans for it. Everything he did to try and appease a toxic, acidic audience. And now, he just wants that audience to understand what he did for them. And still, they refuse to acknowledge him. And that was now the centerpiece of Roman Reigns' character. He was an insecure wrestler, desperate for the validation of the audience, who pretended through a facade that he didn't care, but when that facade slipped, everyone could see that it was the only thing he cared about. All he ever needed was for the audience to acknowledge him. And that's why his catchphrase is not a throwaway line or a juvenile call for attention. It's what Roman's character is. So, okay, sure, it works for Roman Reigns as a character and pro wrestler. But I've called Acknowledge Me the mantra of pro wrestling. Why? Well, think of everything I said before about the battle for TV time that wrestlers face. All of them are vying for the same thing, so they can perform in front of the crowd, so they can forge that connection with an audience, so the audience can acknowledge them. But it's not just other wrestlers this applies to either, but wrestling promotions as a whole. They need audiences to not just flick on the channel and tune in for a bit, but to dive into them, to understand them, to recognize the minor details and Easter eggs they lay out. They need their audiences to acknowledge them. But it's not just wrestling promotions, it's all companies. We live in an attention retention-based society where all companies at all times are vying for your eyes and your loyalty. Entire industries are built off it, sculpted from the need of you to acknowledge them. But it's not just wrestlers, it's not just wrestling promotions, it's not just companies, but people. Don't we all on some level want to matter? To have somebody, some people, be it family, friends, fans even. Don't we at the end of the day want someone to tell us we've done a good job? To inform us we've done well? To highlight and respect the hard work we've put into our jobs, our projects, our personal development, our relationships, our families? I think what we all want is somebody important to us to acknowledge us. At least I do. Maybe I need to bring that up with my therapist. Acknowledge Me doesn't simply demand attention from someone. It asks that when attention is on you, that person sees you completely, sees all of you, and recognizes who and what you are. Acknowledge Me isn't just the mantra of pro wrestling, it's the mantra of people. Is that pretentious enough an ending for this video? I'm waiting for the comments to tell me it's not that deep, bro. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I've got a Patreon where you can get access to some exclusive videos for as low as £1 per month, so check that out, link in the description, and thank you to those Patreon backers, some of whom you can see on the screen now. I'll see you in the next one.